What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Universal Mastery. So in our today's video, we are going to be discussing something that is so valuable and so important to know a lot more about. This has to do with Carl Jung's understanding on the shadow aspects of self and how this also relates back to the true self, the authentic self that we all have. So I'm going to be going into depth in our today's video to explain a little bit more about this authentic, true core self that we have and how the doorways to embody this aspect of self are literally through the darkness of the shadow. A lot of us are wearing masks and a lot of us are identified with different identities, personas we could call them, that are things that we've created in order to survive, that are largely rooted in past traumas. Now, the thing is that a lot of people are unaware, they are unconscious that they're actually identified with these masks and these false identities, which are truly related back to fragmentation within the psyche. So we're going to be going into all of this in this today's video. If this is something that you are interested in and you would like to know a little bit more about, then I would highly recommend that you stay tuned because this is absolutely going to be some valuable education. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so let's jump right out of the gate and let's go into the subject at hand. So we are talking about the authentic self. We're talking about the shadow, which is the unconscious. And then we're also going to be talking about wearing masks, having false self identities that we attach to thinking that's who we actually are. So the first place that I want to start with this is I want to start with the reality that yes, every single one of us, no matter who you are, has an authentic self. This is what we can call, if we're looking at the terms of IFS, this is called the central self. If we're looking at it from a spiritual lens, we can call this the higher self connection. There's many different names that we can give this: the true self, the authentic self, the real self. This is something that every single one of us has at our core, is this real, authentic, central self being. Now, we are born into this authentic self because we're just so little that we don't really understand, what it means to not be ourself yet. And that's where, trauma comes into play. We go through certain types of experiences and certain types of traumas that then causes a degree of fragmentation to take place within our psyche. So we will typically fragment in different directions. We will create a protector fragment that is designed to protect us from feeling the emotions from the trauma that we're going through. And then we'll develop a vulnerable fragment that's holding the pain and holding the emotional wounds of that trauma itself. So we have these two branches of fragmentation that happens in the psyche, and this oftentimes occurs at the early childhood developmental stages. Then as we grow older, we tend to start to identify ourselves with these protector fragmentations that have been manifest. We start to literally say, I am, Jeremiah is this. And this is referring to this protector fragmentation, which has formed an identity within my psyche. So this protector fragment has a goal, and its goal is to protect me by keeping me away from the repressed feelings that are rooted in that core wound of trauma. This part of me has good intentions, but it's not aware that in order for me to actually heal this trauma at the root cause, I actually need to connect with those core root wounds from the trauma. So you can see that there can absolutely be a formula for a lot of disaster to start taking place if we are identified unconsciously with these protector parts of ourself, and they start to assume us and we assume them, and we then forget about our core. We forget about our authentic self. So I'll give you a little bit of an example. Let's say you grew up and you went through some really severe forms of abuse that was really aggressive, and every time you tried to fight back or every time you got angry, you were just abused 10 times harder, to the point where if you even had the emotion of anger or the emotion of fear, you just got hurt even more and more and more. So over time, a fragmentation will occur. And what will generally happen is you'll create a protector part that now says, we won't feel anger and we won't feel fear, because every time we do, we get hurt even more. So this is what we are now going to behave like, and this is how we are going to identify ourselves. Whereas the other fragment, on the other hand, is still feeling the sadness, the pain, the frustration, the anger, the fear that is actually happening under the surface. Whereas at the core of us, in the authentic self, we understand that it's important to be authentic to what it is that we're truly feeling. And when we're coming from this space and we're going through, these amounts of abuse and neglect, it is very easy for us to start separating from that central self to then move into identifying with one of these protector parts of us. All right. Once again, this usually happens at the early childhood developmental stages when we are very needing a protector and a nurturer in our family dynamic. So that's usually going to come through the father and the mother, and we're very dependent on that as children. That's why this fragmentation can occur so significantly. Because, as an adult, as you're hearing me speak about this, you might be able to rationally understand, well, why would I need to do that if I already understand that it's important to feel these emotions and be real with myself? Well, the answer to that question is when you were younger and you went through these different forms of abuse or neglect, you didn't know that at the time. So it was much easier to fragment and then start a process of identifying with certain parts of you that are not necessarily the true you. So with this same example that I'm creating, someone then moves into older adulthood. Let's say this person's now 35 years old, and they are still unconsciously wearing a mask, identified with this protector part of themselves. So they're not being real with who they are. They're not feeling their true emotions. They're actually very avoidant to anger, and they're very avoidant to fear. And they're now wearing this mask as an identity or some form of a persona that is always keeping them safe from what they went through in the past. And the thing is, largely, this is unconscious for a lot of people when this actually happens. So they don't even know that this is what they're doing, and they don't know that this is a response of trauma from the past. So people will identify with these personas, they'll identify with these masks that are protector parts. And as they're doing it, remember the nature of that mask or that protector part is to actually keep them away from the core rooted emotions and memories that are still in the nervous system. So as they're identified with this mask, not only are they separating from the authentic self, the true self, but they are now in a state where they're in avoidance and further repressing the core wounds that are being carried by the vulnerabilities inside of the system, the vulnerable parts and the vulnerable fragmentations. This becomes a recipe for disaster because people that are doing this, which is a lot of people in our today's time, they are going to find themselves in trauma cycles that manifest over and over and over again, that are truly rooted in the deep unconscious and are also rooted within the nervous system still. So a trauma cycle is going to be, you are operating from a certain part of you that you're identified with, and you're actually reliving certain traumas from your past, and you're most likely reliving it unconsciously. simply because you're actually avoiding the core roots of where that trauma is in your body at that emotional level. So because you still have the trauma in your body, and there are still parts of you, those vulnerable parts that are frozen in the past during those traumatic time frames, your energetic field with your nervous system is still in resonance to remanifest those traumas that you went through in the past. So you might notice that if you're doing this, you then attract partners into your life that reflect the same type of abuse that you've been through in your past. You might realize you can't break certain financial barriers. You might start dealing with different forms of mental illness, different forms of depression, because you're not being authentic to who you actually are. You're running away from certain feelings inside of your body. And this is the state that a lot of people go through. So there comes a point where someone's doing this, and this is like, once again, I want to like really iterate on this. This is very natural, and this is very common that we as humans go through this fragmentation and we identify with these masks, these parts of us. Don't judge yourself or don't shame yourself if you've realized that you've done this, or if you're currently doing it now, or even if you're unsure, but you have some speculation that you might be doing it. It's so common and it's so natural. I know for me, for example, this is something that even with all the awareness that I have, it can still slip in at times unconsciously. And obviously, the more awareness you have and the more experience you have with it, the more you get to recognize it for what it is and then get to let it go and reconnect with the core. And that's a whole process. And we'll be discussing a little bit about that. So once again, someone that's operating from the false self, the part of them, they are going to continue going through different forms of pain and suffering and catalyst until there usually comes a point in that person's life where they're ready to finally let it go. They're ready to start a process of real healing, which requires building a relationship with the part of them that they thought was them. Okay, which is a pretty weird thing to experience for the first time if you've never really experienced that before. It's like, this version of me was actually never me. It was a mask that I created from traumas that I've been through in my past. That alone, that acknowledgement and that understanding is massive for someone to actually recognize that and realize that within their system. That starts a process of separating from the part that you might be identified with, separating from the mask that you might be creating to get approval or to not have to feel certain emotions. It starts a process of separating from it, so you slowly start to return more to your core, and then you get to see that part for what it actually is, which is just a part of you. And you get to approach it from a space of self-love and a space of compassion, because you can realize this part of you, even though it might be causing damage in your system, its intentions are not to hurt you. Its intentions were literally just to protect you. And in many ways of understanding it, it probably did protect you from that certain type of abuse you went through or neglect that you went through in the past. So we always want to approach these parts from a space of compassion, recognizing, like, I appreciate you for forming yourself and protecting me in the ways that you have, but I also realize now that I'm an adult and I'm wanting to heal through this stuff, I'm not going to continue identifying with you. I'm going to see you for what you are, which is just a part of me. Largely that is formed from trauma. So that starts a process of building a relationship. And through ego death or ego dissolution, you actually get to return more to your core self, which is the center self. So from the central self space, this is where we are with our truest beingness, which is not fixated, but is always fluctuating. And it has certain types of sensations of being formless, because at the core of self, you are not an identity. You are not an ego. You are a soul and a spirit that is infinite in nature and is connected to literally all things. So when we return to the central self, there is a feeling of deep surrender. There's a feeling of ego dissolution that takes place. There's a feeling of letting go. And it can be a little bit scary because you may not be used to being yourself. You may not be used to being authentic and feeling what you're truly feeling. So this is where you get to start actually redeveloping a new relationship with what it means to be you in more of a holistic and authentic way. And that takes time. That's literally a daily practice to wake up and be you. Now, what you will start to notice when you're allowing yourself to be you again, and you're connecting to your core with this, what's going to start happening is all of those different vulnerable parts of you that are still frozen in the past from those traumatic experiences, that are carrying a lot of those repressed emotions like fear, sadness, abandonment, betrayal, grief, anger, etc. Those parts then start to work their way up to the surface of your system. So now that we're kind of separating from the protector part, creating a distance from it with awareness, now the vulnerable parts start to actually come through, and they start to present themselves as feelings, as sensations in the body, as well as memories that are still in your past. Because once again, those vulnerable parts of you are still parts of you that are literally living in the past still. So it's at this point where we're now starting to do some really deep shadow work. And this is something that every single person has to do in order to maintain that connection to the authentic self. Because just being connected to the authentic self does not mean it's like all love and light and butterflies and rainbows and bliss. There's a lot of beauty to it, but in the beginning stages, especially of building this relationship to the authentic self again, what you're definitely going to notice is that there's a lot of repressed things that you've been pushing down for a very long time that are needing to come through, needing to be seen, and ultimately needing to be accepted and loved so that it can start integrating and processing in a healthy way. So this is where we start doing this really deep shadow work. And rather than trying to control this process or trying to avoid the process again by reattaching to our masks to try to protect ourselves from feeling, we're actually surrendering to it even more. We're allowing ourselves to go through that experience of let go, that experience of dissolution of the identity and the ego that was connected to our false self attachment. And we're allowing ourselves to see the importance and the value of feeling emotions from this state. So this is where we start actually re-feeling and re-experiencing some of those feelings and sensations and memories from the past. This is why it's called shadow work, because you can imagine this is not a comfortable process to go through, especially as you are now an adult and you're allowing yourself to go through this healing process. And the next thing you know, you're literally feeling like you're actually reliving certain experiences from your past that were really traumatic experiences. And it's not that you're actually reliving them exactly, but it's that you're visiting them on a psychic and an energetic level, as well as an emotional and a mental level. You're revisiting those experiences literally within your body at a nervous system level. So it can feel like you're literally going back in time to those time frames where it was traumatic. The resonance within the body is so powerful that when you're doing this work, you might even manifest in your physical life in the present moment similar situations and circumstances and triggers that bring you back to the past. This is what it means to do shadow work. We are working within the shadow. We are stepping into the unconscious, and we are facing it with an education that this is a natural process. So we don't take that step into the shadow like that and then have to jump right back out and resort back to our mask and then our unhealthy coping mechanisms that comes with it. We are gradually allowing ourselves to work with that shadow, to re-feel those emotions, to go through the ego dissolution, to revisit these experiences from our past that were really scary or challenging experiences that we've been through before. And we're actively allowing ourselves to do this. And we're not giving ourselves a time frame on when it has to finish or when it has to be done. We're not telling ourselves that, we have to, push through it and override it to just get it done with so we can feel better again, we have to approach it with full acceptance and patience and consistency. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to be with our central self, our core self, our authentic self. And then we take that core self and now we're visiting these wounded parts of us that are in the past, those vulnerable parts. This is a form of parenting or reparenting the wounded parts of the inner child. So it's from this core self that we get to then be with these wounded parts of self. And once again, this is reparenting the inner child. And this is a very powerful thing to do in order to heal through trauma and show these wounded parts of you, everything is okay. We are not living in the past anymore. You don't need to stay there anymore. I am with you. I'm willing to feel what you're feeling, and I'm going to let you know through my knowing that everything's okay now. We're in a safer space now. And then that allows those parts of us that are frozen in the past to unfreeze slowly and then come into the present moment with us where there actually is safety. So something as simple as being connected to your core self and letting yourself feel certain emotions that you were not able or allowed to feel when you were younger, that is a form of reparenting and healing the wounded inner child. It's as simple as you weren't allowed to feel fear or weren't allowed to feel anger when you were just a little kid, and then you created that mask that never gets angry and never is afraid. Healing these wounds is as simple as returning back to your core and realizing, you know what? I do have these feelings in my body. I am afraid. I am a bit frustrated with everything that took place. And you know what? I'm allowed to feel that. I'm allowed to be connected with my core, knowing that everything's okay, knowing that I'm safe, knowing that everything's working out in my best interest. And from this space, then I can start allowing myself to feel those emotions I was never allowed to feel before, or I never felt safe to feel before. This becomes that process of, once again, healing the wounded inner child, reparenting the inner child, and it becomes a daily practice of how you start to show up in everyday life, actually being you, not having to step outside of you to then be something for other people, or to be a people pleaser, to be codependent, to be a narcissist, to control everything, to whatever it is, whatever mask that we create to try to create that false sense of safety when we know we're not being our truest self. That is the daily practice. When we recognize that we're doing that, we then get to return back to our core and say, you know what? I think right now I'm not being as authentic as I can be. I think potentially I'm actually acting this way because there are deeper things that I'm truly feeling that I'm not wanting to feel right now. And maybe I should be with that. Maybe I should take a step back and realize it's okay to feel these things. And if for some reason that upsets other people, or that makes other people not like me as much, or that changes like different things in my life, like different relationships, whether it's work relationships or intimate partnerships, whatever that is, it's like, that's the daily practice. We have to start reorganizing and realigning our life with who we actually are, so that we can start resonating with experiences that are going to fuel our soul's development, not keep us in these repetitive patterns where cycles of trauma keep manifesting over and over again, and we're never being us. You know, think about all the friendships and relationships and and work environments and jobs that you've had where maybe you weren't being you, and everything that you were manifesting around that was sort of inauthentic, and all it took was one traumatic experience or one catalyst to shift all of that, and then you died to that mask that you were holding on to, and now you're in tune with your core, or you're being forced to be in tune with your core, and you feel like you're losing everything. It's like everything feels like it's falling apart. Friendships, relationships, jobs are letting you go, and you're like, what's going on? Am I not worthy? You know, why am I being abandoned like this? Why is the world doing this to me? And the whole thing was actually rooted in you not being true to you, not being authentic to you. That's how crazy this stuff is. That's why it's so important to do this work, to understand the unconscious, to understand the inner child, to understand these parts of us that sometimes we can identify with as protective mechanisms that keep us away from actually doing the inner work. So we can rebuild a relationship to our whole system and understand more and more of what it means to be with our central self, with our core self. And then we can build our life from that space, and our life can start blossoming, and it can start transforming in a way that is in alignment with what's in our best interest, what our soul truly desires, and what is us. We get to create more of what is us at our deepest core. And there's nothing that feels better than that. We don't have to settle for less. We don't have to step outside of ourselves to try to get some sort of control and false security there. We can be us, and we can learn how to accept ourselves, learn not how to abandon ourselves, learn how to actually love ourselves between our core and these wounded parts of us. And that takes time. So it's going to require consistency. It's going to require patience in this whole process, but it's absolutely worth it. And as you allow yourself to work with those deeper portions of the shadow, yes, you start to integrate and process a lot of those things in your system. All of those things that were repressed in there, you could think of them as like energetic blockages that are heavy, dense, negative energy. And as you start to feel those things and work with it and approach it with compassion and acceptance and patience and consistency, within time, those charges lessen and lessen and lessen, and so much more of your potential actually opens up in your life. And it's not even something you have to control. It's something that just happens. And then things start attracting themselves to you. New relationships, healing family relationships, new job environments, job opportunities that are more aligned with who you are. Maybe you start your own business, your friendships improve, your health, your physical health improves. You may have had allergies your whole life. You may have been dealing with deep depression. That starts to change and drastically resolve. That's the power of doing shadow work. So we're going to wrap it up here. If you got value from this video, definitely make sure you are slamming the thumbs up button. Drop down into the comment section and let me know what you learned from this. I would love to hear your own experience working with the shadow, if you've studied some of Carl Jung's stuff before, as well as if you're aware of wearing masks and, you're aware of these different parts of you that sometimes, we can identify with. Share all of your different thoughts in that comment section. I would love to hear it. Now get notified when I post. Make sure you hit the bell icon. I'm literally posting every single day, so make sure you take advantage of that. Hit the subscribe button. You definitely want to subscribe to what it is that I'm teaching, because subscribing is actually going to further connect you into this content. So if you want to get more value from it, I would encourage you to subscribe. Copy and paste this link and send it to someone that needs to hear it. I guarantee you there is someone that comes to your mind right now that would gain some form of value from this content. I encourage you to copy and paste the link and send it to that person. Now I'm going to take your awareness to literally the most important link within the entire description. This is the first link below. It's my Patreon. I have exclusive content all over the Patreon, over 280 plus videos that goes into all of these different important subjects when it comes to the self-development process, including occultism. So I have regulation of the nervous system, trauma education, stuff like what we talked about in today's video. I have ritualistic practices and an entire magic training course for people that are wanting to become occultists and go through a step-by-step structure on everything you need to do and everything you need to know to do this successfully. All of this is organized in very neat sections, collection sections on the Patreon. Tons of people are taking advantage of it. If this is something you're interested in, look into it. Tier number 3 and 4 of the Patreon is really unique. This is actually a ritual service that I perform on the 29th of every single month. That is an energetic transfer from me to you as the participant. This energetic ritual supports working with the deepest parts of the unconscious mind and starting a process of actually integrating and merging with the shadow. Now, as I perform this ritual, it's going to surface a lot of these things in your body at a nervous system level, and it's also going to promote a foundation for you to be able to integrate these things in a healthy way. Now, as you start to integrate that shadow self, it starts to then work with you in your everyday life rather than resisting you, which is what most people experience. So there are about 300 active members that are continuously taking advantage of this ritual service every single month, which alone speaks for itself. Tons of people have given me valuable, positive feedback from what they've noticed has shifted ever since they became a participant of the ritual service. If this is something that you're also interested in, I encourage you to take advantage of it. First link in that description below. We'll leave it there. Now in the second link, this is where you can book a one-on-one call with me, but it's also where you can book mentorships with me. Okay, so if you want to jump into a 6-week mentorship or a 3-month mentorship, I would be more than honored to be able to work with you through this deeper process of healing trauma, understanding your unique trauma history, and also helping you build a foundation that is unique to you to help you go through that process and regulate your nervous system. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and currently I have a full schedule, and I literally work with people from all over the world right now, and it's something that I really appreciate doing. Now, once we establish the foundation, if it's also something that you're interested in, then we can start moving into occult initiation, and I am also a guide for that process as well. So if you're interested in any of that, it's at the second link below. Now in the same second link, you can book a tarot card reading with Alexia. She's a very gifted tarot card reader. She can help you understand what you're currently going through and then what to expect moving into your near future. So if you want to take advantage of that, get your tarot card read by her. Okay, second link. Third link is what's called a Lucifer's Foundation course. This is a course that I've created with my partner, the Cosmic Observer, and we gave you step-by-step instructions from our own personal experience on everything you need to know and do to develop a powerful relationship with the energy that is known as Lucifer, the light bearer. If this is something you want to take advantage of, it's in the third link below. Tons of people have taken advantage of it, tons of positive feedback. People are still buying it to this day. So look into it. It's the third link. The fourth link is going to be my YouTube memberships. I would love to have you a part of the Universal Mastery family because it's a big collective here of like-minded individuals, and it's always nice to see all of you show up in the comment sections as well as the live chats when we do the live streams. And then within time, I'm even going to be doing stuff with exclusive content for the YouTube members as well. So with that being said, I would love to have you in the family. Check it out. It's the fourth link. Now, the fifth link is going to be my book recommendations for you. This is going to give you step-by-step instructions on literally everything you need to know about the fundamentals and the basics of occultism itself. Kabbalah, the tarot, tunnels of Set, the tree of death and life, angels and demons, all of this very valuable information that you can use as tools for the rest of your process. There is a 4 ebook bundle that you can purchase at that fifth link below. And then there's also an option to buy these books in the physical form on Amazon if you want the actual physical copies. With that being said, we're going to wrap it up here. I appreciate all of you so very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video, and I will catch you then. Goodbye.